Dude, we're back. Welcome to I don't even know what you want to call this podcast. I don't even know if it's a podcast, but one of the things that has been on my heart that we've been talking about is some of the lessons that we've learned in the 6.5 years we've been in our relationship. You thought we've been dating since 2018. I had to remind you that it's been 2016. Not a big deal. We're not going to hold that against you. That's one of the lessons, but I thought it'd be cool if we could share maybe like a top 10 of all the lessons that we've learned over the last 6.5 years.
Okay.
So
sounds great.
You get to start. What's the biggest lesson that you've learned in the last 6.5 years? Like, what's the best way to ruin a marriage? Let's frame it that way. Like, what is the best way to ruin a marriage?
Avoid having the hard conversations.
Yeah. All right. What do you mean?
In order to have like a good connection, you have to be able to have the hard conversations of like whatever you're struggling with, or maybe you did something and I need to bring it up, instead of holding that resentment. So I think being open and having those lines of communication is super important. Was
that hard for you at first, especially coming from the Midwest?
Yeah.
You guys don't do that in your family, do you?
Yeah, we don't really talk about stuff.
So I guess like when we started dating, because my family's very different, right?
Yeah.
That's all we do. Like if something happens, it's like, boom, it's right in your face. What was that like? When we started to have some of these hard conversations that you were normally accustomed to just sweeping under the rug?
I think it was definitely an adjustment for us.
Yeah.
We struggled a lot in the beginning, and I think that was probably one of the main reasons why we did.
Yeah.
And going to couples therapy and learning how we can have those conversations and not have it turn into an explosive fight was
We're good at those.
We were.
Yeah.
I feel like we've gotten a lot better.
Yeah. Remember that time you threw something at me and then I had to stay in a hotel room?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
Remember that time? There's been plenty of shit that I've done too. I just wanted to make sure that we brought that up.
Oh yeah, because you're the innocent one.
I'm not. No. In fact, I didn't realize I had such a temper. It runs as an Italian family. That's what I grew up watching people scream. So no, I'm not. I am not good at that. I was just joking, because I know that's something that we joke about now.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. All right. What's the best ways to ruin a marriage? Stop having sex and stop trying to initiate sex. I felt like for a while there, you and I were just roommates.
Yeah.
And it wasn't your fault, and it wasn't my fault, but life picks up, right? We have a kid, and work's busy, and now all of a sudden, we're not having any sex.
Yep.
Right? And there's this really important part about it, right? Not only does it build connection, and it's really fucking fun, but there's chemicals that are released, connection chemicals that all you people out there who know more about science than me are gonna just rip me apart, but there's things that are released when you have sex, oxytocin and all that type of stuff that builds this connection. I think part of that is when you're not doing it, right? It's hard.
Yeah.
I think any good marriage needs to have that.
For sure. Yeah. I think we definitely felt like roommates.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, you just start, the relationship changes. So there's not that romance anymore.
Yeah. But you know what's interesting too is once we brought attention to us wanting to have more sex and initiating more sex, it went from 0 to 10 times in 3 weeks. And I was like, this is awesome, right? I don't know if that's sustainable, but I shared that with you just because it's cool to know that you're able to make these changes, right? And when we were in it, you said it one time, you're like, I've read that the more you have sex, the more you want it, right? So I just think couples who are in relationships, it feels like what'd you call it? Roommate?
Roommates.
Yeah, I feel like roommates, it's make that a priority and watch how everything starts to change.
Yeah.
All right, what's another thing that you've learned over the last 6.5 years?
I think if you're in a negative headspace, it's so easy to focus on all the things that your partner, you do that upsets me.
Yeah.
And so I think being stuck in that negative headspace can just build and compound on each other, that eventually if you don't bring it up, it just ends up in a really terrible fight.
And it's true, you're doing stuff that normally would not upset me, right? And that's all I can focus on. You'll leave a pan in the sink, right? Or you have this thing that you're notorious for where you'll use a towel and then you'll just leave it on the counter. And then at the end of the day, there's 7 of them. And it's when
like your pop cans, right?
Yes, like my soda cans. But when I think about it, right, it's like when I take a step back, right, when I'm in that headspace, right, that's a really great way to ruin your relationship if it's just like that's all you focus on.
Yeah.
But in that moment when you're like, well, Leslie's not trying to purposely make my life harder.
No.
Right? It makes it a lot easier to focus on the things that I do like.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes you just get busy and have to leave a pan in the sink, but like it's not purposely, it's like it'll get done eventually.
So like focus on the things that they do right.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's so many things that you do right as a mom and as a wife, right? And as my friend, right? Like that's amazing. And like when I focus on those things, like to me, like you're perfect.
Thank you.
And obviously you don't feel that, and obviously you don't feel that way in return. So we're just gonna move right on to the next one.
You're perfect too, man.
Yeah, I'm perfect too. Okay. All right, the next way, right, that I think is a really easy way to just fuck up and ruin your marriage is to tell little white lies, right? I remember one time you came out. This is when we first started dating, and you asked if I liked the outfit you had on, and I was like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
And you were like, you got so upset, right? Because I feel like you were so used to just having somebody be like, yeah, you look great.
Yeah.
And like, you did look good. It just wasn't my favorite outfit. I think that's what I said. I was like, it's not my favorite outfit. And that ended up with us getting into a fight. But I think what came out of that was me being like, hey, listen, I'm not going to sacrifice me telling the truth to you simply to make you feel better, right? And I know you've done it to me before too.
Yeah.
In a great way. Right? But like, I feel like when you start to tell those little white lies can come into big lies, and those big lies turn into you hiding things from your spouse.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I remember a fight where, and I'm a really bad liar, and so
I know.
You can catch me like pretty much all the time. But you asked me a question and I said yes when I actually didn't do it or something. I can't remember the specifics, but you were like, are you lying to me? And then
it was when we tried to pay off your car, and I was like, did you call the bank about getting you're like, yep, I called. And then you hadn't called, and then we were up against the deadline. I was like, why'd you lie to me about that? And you're like, I didn't mean to. Yeah. So.
Silly things.
But it's even embellishing, right? Like embellishing the story, right? Like that's a big one. It seems like it's not that big of a deal, right? But you've called me out where we've been out with friends and I've embellished on something that happened, right? Because we all know I like to be the center of attention, and when I'm with a group of friends, like that's a big part of it, right? I like to play up the stories, and you were basically like, you're lying. I was like, no, I'm not. You're like, well, you're embellishing. That's what you do. And then I was like, fuck, you're right.
Yeah. The next way that you can easily ruin your marriage is holding grudges.
Yeah.
I feel like it goes back to that first one that we kind of talked about too. Like if something is really bothering you, you have to bring it up, and you can't hold grudges because it's just gonna cause like bad things in your marriage.
Do you feel like there's been times where either you or me have held a grudge and then that grudge has turned into resentment?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think like after we had Luca, you know, and like you going back to work really early, and just like how hard that time was for me. I think I held a grudge for a while. I feel better about it now.
Yeah.
I think we're in a much more like balanced place than we were, but I was holding a grudge, and that just caused like resentment where like you get nitpicky, like back to the other things of like the small things even upset you. So I think it's easy for it just to kind of like layer on top of each other, and if you don't address those things, then it just can be really terrible for your marriage.
Yeah, it's a quick way to ruin it. So advice, let that shit go. Just let that shit go.
Have a conversation.
Yeah. All right, this next one, always try to be right. I feel like, when you get into this fight with your spouse, like there's this moment where your ego takes over and you're trying to be right because you want to show them that like, no, I'm right in this situation.
Right.
And exactly. And the reality is when you take a step back and you're like, well, what do I want out of this? Well, I don't want to fight. I want to have some type of resolution, and I want to get through this, right? I don't want to be in the fight.
Right.
And so when you look at that, it's like, do you want to get what you want, or do you want to be right? Because there's a price to pay for this one.
Yeah.
And simply in being right, you're probably going to end up in some type of conflict and some type of resentment and some type of grudge. On this one, when you're both working to figure out like what you want, right? It's much better. I mean, there's been times where we've been in fights and we're just going at it and we both stop and we go, it's kind of dumb.
Yeah.
And we're like, should we just stop? And we're like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I feel like, I don't know, it doesn't really matter if you're right or you're wrong. It just matters like how your partner feels and how you feel. And like, are you gonna walk away from this conversation feeling like better that you like were right or you won? Or will you feel better knowing that like you both came together, let your egos down and actually resolved and know how to move forward? Yeah,
for sure. All right, what's another great way to ruin your marriage?
Another great way is just to settle for good or mediocrity. I think in our relationship, like you're constantly striving to be the best in all areas of your life. So I think just like being able to push ourselves always keeps that like new and fresh perspective between each other, and I feel like we can hold each other accountable with whatever we put on our vision board at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I think there's like this level of complete bullshit when somebody's like, how's your relationship? And you're like, oh, it's good. Like the second I hear, like when I tell somebody, oh, our relationship is good, the reality is there's some type of pain in there, right? Either we're not having enough sex, or we're fighting, or we're, there's something going on at home, or Luca's driving us crazy, or we're sleep deprived, or we're not going out on dates. Like there's always something that when it's like, oh, it's good, it's fine, like this is sustainable for the next 25 years, but is this something that like ignites the fire under me and makes me want to be in the relationship?
Right.
When it's good, it's a fucking hard no. But when you and I are clicking and we're moving in the right direction and it becomes something that I'm like, yes, this is exactly where I want to be, and it's like this greatness and it's like this elite relationship that we're in, to me, like that's how it should be. Yeah. Right? And I feel like that is very achievable and sustainable, but it takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
The last one, the best way to ruin your marriage is to break your promises. I told Lizzie one time, I was like, hey, I'm gonna start taking you on weekly date nights. And you looked me straight in the face and you go, I don't believe you. And when you said that, it was one of those moments where I was like, okay. I had to like reconcile that in my own head, because the reality is I had told you so many times that we were going to do weekly date nights and then we didn't. And so to me, what happened in that moment? Well, fucking, I went through the roof. I was pissed. I was like, what the fuck? Like, what are you talking about? Of course we're gonna do this. And then I took a step back and I realized it was like, oh, no wonder she feels this way. I've just been feeding her a bag of lies, and this is just another lie. You didn't trust me. You didn't believe in me. And of course, at that moment, you're like, yeah, whatever. Like, it is what it is. You're not gonna do that. And so if you want to really ruin a relationship, continue to lie, but more importantly, stop trying to date your wife.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Especially with a kid now, there's just so much more planning that has to like take place.
Yeah.
In order for us to like make a weekly date night or even like a monthly date night.
Yeah.
I don't know. Got to find like childcare and like what day and schedules and all the things. So,
yeah.
But it is fun getting back to going out on dates.
So the whole thought behind this, right, is like take all the things that we said are going to ruin your relationship and do the opposite. Right? Anchor to the things that you don't want, and then realize that there's a path out of that to exactly what you do want by doing the complete opposite. Right? So,
yeah.
Cool.